To order our meeting of the Carson City Airport Authority this evening on Wednesday, the 20th of November. And Bradley, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which we stand, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we need
I forgot roll call.
You have the right to change the.
That's okay. I screwed up. So, tomorrow, could we have roll call and also introduction?
Yes. I'd like to introduce Danielle Howard. She's going to be taking over for me for this committee. And so you're in great hands. And Danielle's a graduate of UNR, so you're all cheer. And she's going to be doing an awesome job for you, and I'll be busy with Board of Supervisors and Planning Commission and all those other ones. So we'll do a roll call right now, and then I understand, Mr. Chair, that I need to swear in a new member.
We'll be doing that in a moment.
Okay.
Yep.
Chairperson Golden,
Here.
Vice Chair Harris, Treasurer Rogers, Member Barrett, Member Hamilton, Member Pulitz, Member Simmons.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Okay, very well. So, as Tamar noted, we need to swear in a new member, but before we do, wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Tim to the rest of the Airport Authority. Tim's a private pilot, has a twin Comanche. He's a member of the Carson City Sheriff's Aero Squadron, flies Young Eagles, and bases his aircraft at Carson City Airport. He's a valued patron and an upstanding member of the community, and we thank you immensely for volunteering your time to join us periodically and help guide the airport, Tim. So with that, Tamar, could you swear him in? And Tim, is it? Pulitz.
Pulitzer Prize.
Pulitz, okay, just want to make, you knew I was going to ask. Well, with that, going to move to approve the minutes of past meetings. Anyone have any comments on those minutes? Anyone? Get a motion to approve those minutes from any one of my colleagues?
I move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the past minutes as submitted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. So the minutes are approved. We're not going to be modifying the agenda tonight unless there's any requests from our airport manager or airport council to that effect? No? Okay. Public comment. At this time, I would invite any members of the public who wish to address the airport authority on any agendized or non-agendized matters to do so at this time? And any members of the public? I guess not. Okay, moving right along. Discussion and possible action. Approval of the annual audit report for the Carson City Airport. And I'm going to turn this over to Beth, who does a great job for us every year. It is all yours.
Do you want me to start over? Okay, so Beth Cone, for the record, Beth Cone Cole with Ide Bailey CPAs. So, right now in front of you, you should have, two things, a letter and a bound audited financial statement. I believe you also received that via email prior to the meeting. The letter summarizes our responsibilities and your responsibilities and important items summarizing our adjusting journal entries, both on the government-wide financial statements and on your fund budgeted statements. So I like to tell people there's two sets of financial statements for a government. There's the fund basis, which is how you do your budget, and then there's the government-wide, which includes all accruals, including your PERS liability, your share of PERS liability. But I'm going to focus on the budget basis because that's what you operate on a daily basis. And then the audit opinion is on page 1 and 2. And our audit opinion was a clean audit opinion. And then I'm going to move on to kind of look at the budget to actual report, which is on page 23. So your total revenue for the year was approximately $552,000, which was about $27,000 less than budget, and I round. So if you're not with me, let me know. And the primary decrease was how much you spent on FAA projects, how much you actually received on FAA projects, and corresponding how much you spent. Your other revenue was $41,000 better than budget, with the largest portion of that being your interest earnings. Now that you're in the local government investment pool, you're generating more revenue, and your rock sales were higher than budget. Your expenditures under the airport services and supplies were under budget by approximately $47,000, and the primary difference there had to do with reduced legal costs. On page 24, your airport administration was pretty close to break even at a $5,000 under budget. So your total airport operations was almost $53,000 better than budget for expenditures. On the capital outlay side, you spent money on your master plan update, which was not budgeted, and then you spent other FAA funds for the airport reconstruction, perimeter fencing. You had additional expenses you purchased a fence gate, a new gate, I guess, and then you had some other engineering costs. So your total capital outlay and engineering totaled approximately $429,000, which was about $49,000 better than budget. So in total, your expenses were $102,000 better than budget, and your excess of revenue over expenses was approximately $150,000. So that improved your financial position to a net fund balance of $949,000. So a good operating result for 2019. A lot of the rest of the financials, and I'll answer questions, but I know you had it in advance, has to do with the footnotes, a lot of which consists of that PERS liability, like 3 or 4 pages that we're required to disclose. We do an audit in accordance with government auditing standards, and we did have a couple audit findings this year, and they are on page 32. So in this past year, you added a new accounting firm, and they are doing your bookkeeping. And there were some challenges there, and I know Ken will jump in, but there were some challenges there this year. And I know that they have changed staffing, which has makes Ken feel a lot better going forward. She seems much more on top of what's going on. but we posted a lot of adjustments. So as a result of that, we have two audit findings. We have a material weakness over the preparation of financial statements. So one of the items, we always prepare your financial statements, but they're not our financial statements. So you or someone on your board or your accounting firm, someone has to have the ability that if we didn't prepare them, they could prepare them, including all the PERS liabilities and those items. And with all the adjustments we had, we felt that that was not the case this year. And then on page 33 is the material weakness regarding adjusting journal entries. We recorded material journal entries to almost every account, significant journal entries this year. And I know that has not been the case in the past, and I'm sure it won't be the case in the future, because Ken prepared and I know you'll jump in, but Ken went, after all these issues occurred, prepared a checklist that the accounting firm should use as a start every month on a month-end reconciliation basis. And then I met with both Ken and the new accountant, bookkeeper, to review what my issues were so they'd see what I do to make sure that the numbers are fairly stated.
And if I may, Chair Golden, elaborate on that a little bit. As this came up during the audit process, I circled back with Treasurer Rogers, and we made a visit, and we met with both the new bookkeeper and the principal of the CPA firm, Kelly Bolus, and had an in-depth discussion about what we expected and thought we should be, the kind of service we should be getting, and we didn't feel we were getting that. Obviously, the buck doesn't pass to them. That's something that is my responsibility, and so I took that part very seriously and communicated with Treasurer Rogers about the correction process going forward. As Beth mentioned, a creation of a checklist, both internally for myself, but also one for the firm. So going forward, we're going to do quarterly sit down with the accounting firm to go through that checklist and ensure that it's being followed. From their end, they took responsibility for their lack of oversight on their side and felt that they did us a disservice and expressed that they wanted to a chance to correct that, which was my intent too. It took a while to get some of the translation of the way that the government accounting is over private sector, but also how the FAA grant money is handled and how it's accounted for. And so with that being said, I think we're in a better position than we were when we first started with them. They had a full year. We started with them in July of last year, so the beginning of the fiscal year. And so I think we're getting some of that squared away. I know that there's still some offer from Beth to communicate with the new bookkeeper to make sure that those entries are correct, and what they're doing is, if they have any questions, they can go to Beth as a resource. And so I feel with it, it was a good process for us to go through, and that's why we do an audit. So.
And in fact, with all my adjustments, which were significant and detailed, that I went over and provided her the backup, she posted those adjustments. She sent it to me to make sure they match your audit from last year now. So just the fact that they were able to go through all that detail and get your records to match the audited final numbers shows that she has a better understanding than the prior accountant.
Let me just state, before I open this up to my other associates and counterparts, it is unfortunate that there were a number of journal entries that needed to be made in order to get us to a final work product. But it does happen. When there's an inordinate number, that's a problem. I concur with you on that. I've been in that chair before where I've had to accept the fact that, it just wasn't working right, and there had to be numerous journal entries to balance the books.
Yeah, I mean, if it was one or two, like an extra monthly invoice was posted for a lease or something, but it was a lot more than that.
Understood. With that, I'd open this up to my counterparts. Start down with Tim here. Any comments from anyone to my left?
I'm just in a learning curve here, so I did review everything, and I'm still trying to absorb this style, so it'll take me a while, but I'm pleased that it's pretty thorough, and I will get through it.
Okay. You gentlemen have anything?
This is Clyde Simmons. I would just like to request that the things of this level of importance to the board, that we have a little more opportunity to review them. I think that if there's chances in the future to get it a little more in advance before we come to meet, that would be preferred. I just felt I was not able to really fully digest it in the few days that I had.
And that's one of the discussions that John and I have had with the new bookkeeper as well, is being able to get them to us a little bit more in advance and allow us to go through them prior to preparing for the board.
Bradley? John?
The only thing I want to add is that in addition to all the remedies that have been discussed, Ken, much to his credit, has instituted some improved procedures for coding the information that goes to the accountant to give the bookkeeper the best possible chance of getting everything right for the first time. And so that's an additional change that we've made that should have a positive benefit.
Paul, any comments, or
Paul Hamilton, no comments.
Bradley, don't want to skip you over? Okay. So
Can
go
I
ahead,
make one more
Beth.
comment? I would appreciate it if you would be reviewing the bank statements too, John. I don't know if you do, and sign off on those on a monthly basis. I know, I didn't do a finding on that because I know that before the prior chair was looking at a lot of that during my audit year. But now that she's not reviewing that and going in a lot to Ken's office, now that you're doing that, you should be looking at those bank statements for unusual transactions, bill pay, direct bill pay, anything unusual. You know, if you know that the leases are approximately X amount each month, you should see about that being deposited on a monthly basis. Make sure the local government investment pool doesn't have transfers going out. It's just an extra internal control. So I would recommend that to you.
Thank you for the recommendation, and Ken and I have implemented that starting in August.
Excellent, thank you.
So it is incumbent upon the airport authority to approve this budget. So with that in mind, any members of the public have any comments? I don't see any. So the audit report has to be approved. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the annual audit and report from the Carson City Airport Authority for fiscal year 2018, 2019. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, the audit is approved. Yes, Beth?
I would just like to thank Ken. I know I was a little difficult to work with this year because it was really challenging and I spent a lot of extra time that I didn't bill you for. And I kind of I got a little hardcore. So I would, because I just don't like to see it that way. So I'd like to thank Ken for being so responsive and nice back to me. So thank you.
Thank you again, Beth. Great job. Okay. So item number 3, for discussion and possible action to set parameters for development of an intermediate and long-term capital plan. And I'm going to turn this over to Ken.
Thank you. This is something that Treasurer Rogers and I have been working on. We had a meeting to discuss our approach to this. If you go to the board memo, as part of our strategic plan, we had a initiative, or one of our goals was to maintain airport infrastructure in its top condition. And the initiative that came out of that was to develop an intermediate and long-term facility and capital equipment improvement program. And so the objective is that I think the tractor kind of demonstrated that issue. It was an unfortunate circumstance, but what it revealed was that though we have funds and different accounts available to pay for that, if we had established a fund for replacement, when we get to this point in time, we should be able to just write the check for it in that instance. We did have funds, but we would have had to transfer some of those funds out of our local government investment pool to have done that. But what it identifies also, and Gary and I have been working on this as kind of a wish list from when I first arrived, is what equipment do we need, what tools do we need that we don't have in order to maintain the airport infrastructure. One is there's going to be a need to replace the flatbed work truck that Gary operates now. I have been a little reticent about going out and buying new equipment without having a facility to place that in, and instead of it sitting in the weather. So we looked at a couple of options for that. Well, as we were looking at carports or a semi-permanent structure or things of that nature, when we went through our airport capital improvement program with our consulting engineer, we identified the need for the snow equipment removal building. As you know, we have a 1984 auto car snowplow given to us by the Nevada Department of Transportation. That was long in the tooth when we got it. The work truck was purchased as a used vehicle from Truckee Airport. That was long in the tooth when we got it. So the objective is to have a place to put these piece of equipment and have them be able to be out of the weather and maintained properly in a proper facility. So with that being said, on our grant that we have a grant application for our next fiscal year 2021 is the design phase of the snow equipment removal building. And so when I get to my manager's report, I have a little piece about that. So when Treasurer Rogers and I met, we discussed what are the ways that we should look at this. And some of it is short-term need. We did in our budget this year. We have some capital projects that we put in our budget to repair the parking lot out front. We have a project to replace the doors in the terminal to upgrade them for not only appropriate R rating, but the ones that have the panic bar for safety and those concerns. So we've identified some of that through our budget going forward. And then the other piece was what should we be putting monies aside for to be able to replace? The terminal buildings is an obvious candidate. When is that going to take place? We have to kind of look at our master plan, kind of walk through a piece of that as we looked at future development. But also the upgrade of other things that are not part of the grant funding. Now, our grant money for our local match has to be identified and set aside as well to meet those obligations. So when we're going forth on this, Treasurer Rogers and I thought it would be appropriate to come to the board and say, look, we've kind of scoped out a process that we think to do that, and then wanted to get the feedback from the remainder of the board before we put too much more ink to paper, and that was how to look at the funding scheme for that. So we looked at three different parameters. One is the budget for that we do on an annual basis. The other was an intermediate fund for equipment we think we're going to replace in the next 3 to 10 years. And then the other piece was a long-term fund for stuff that's further out. For example, the parking lot out front at some point is going to have to be replaced. We did a maintenance project this year, which is basically rejuvenating it, crack seal and the put down of a fog seal to do that. We need to do that every 3 years, so we have to have a cycle for that. The runway is going to get rejuvenated next year. That's in our grant request to do that. So we're going to have the appropriate set aside for that. We just did the taxiway project this year, and then the aprons are going to fall into that. So you can see that there's going to be a need to meet those local matches as well as replacement of other equipment. So the other funding sources that we looked at and a way to start looking at this in more structured way was to look at the non-aeronautical revenue that we generate. So the cell tower leases, we get a certain amount of money every year off of that, around in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000. We have the rock sale royalties, which have been carrying the airport as far as profit margins are concerned over the last few years. And then we have the local government investment pool accrued interest. So together annually, those could generate in the neighborhood of $75,000 to $100,000. So what I'd like from the board is to hear, basically to offer any suggestions on that and allow staff and the treasurer to work together to create this long-term, intermediate and long-term facility equipment, capital improvement program, and identify a funding scheme that we'll bring back for future approval by the board. And that concludes my report.
John, did you want to add to this? Please.
The discussion, my perspective on the discussions that Ken and I have is we're just wanting to kick some ideas around. I think that the need to plan for capital expenditures is there. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And so we talked about 3 different ways that you could approach that. One is the way that we're doing it now, which is I call ad hoc. When a need comes up, we bring it to the board and we fill it. We could continue to do that. We are doing that off budget, which is not necessarily a great thing, but Ken was wanting to have money earmarked for that, and set aside into a different bank account so that and have it grow over time and become available to do capital projects. And so we were just kicking around ideas about how to fund that, and Ken mentioned one. We could apportion some portion of our non-aeronautical sales to that account and let it fund that account over time and have that money be available for capital projects. And the other idea that we had was we could make it be part of some kind, for lack of a better word, an incentive program that we could say to Ken, hey, Ken, for, and any portion, if any activities that you engage in that cause you to beat the budgeted numbers and result in a additional profit for our enterprise, we could earmark that for capital improvements, and we could make that available for Ken to use to fix up the terminal building, and to do the other capital programs. So basically, what we want from the board is just some opinions about, one, do we want to continue to do capital to do no capital planning and just deal with capital needs when they come up like we're doing now? Or do we want to do capital planning, and if so, what's the best way to fund a capital account? And so to reiterate, the 2 ideas that we had were the non-aeronautical sales, some portion of that going into a capital account, or the hey, Ken, if you beat the budget, we'll take some of that money and put it in the capital account. But I'm sure that this bunch of business people that are sitting up here, there might be some other interesting ideas, or this group might say, you know what, we're okay with just doing it ad hoc, on a case-by-case basis. That's what we're wanting to hear from the board.
Fair enough. Thank you for your thought process and bringing this as a discussion to the airport authority. As a point of order, this is not an action item. We don't really need to take action on this. More so, it's give direction to both yourself and to Ken. I'm going to go. Do you want?
That's exactly right. We're just looking for some direction from the board.
Perfect.
Looking for to take the pulse of the board.
Perfect. And I'm going to use my platform here as the airport chair to weigh in first and then listen to everybody else, if that's okay. I think, good planning and good business practice dictates that we should have some sort of a plan, and we should have a funding mechanism in place. That said, okay, I'd like to see something in the form of a plan for the airport authority to consider. Even with that, it is also very common practice that you have funding allocated for capital improvement. That funding still needs to come before the airport authority or the appropriate body, if we were in business, before it gets spent. Typically, we have a threshold internally, and we set the threshold, and we say, look, at this dollar amount, you guys as staff can spend on these items. Anything above this dollar amount, you better come back to us and seek our approval. The other thing that we should consider is to have some sort of a sinking fund. We do, when you talk about budgeting, we do get or take in revenue from a variety of sources, and operating revenue in particular from the gates, right? The gate cards. There should be some money allocated out of that for that specific function on an annualized basis, even if we just budget it. It doesn't have to be in a separate account. But from an operating standpoint, we should be doing that. We should be taking money from rents, for example, our land leases, and allocating a portion of that to pavement maintenance, because let's face it, rent and flow fee is where the majority of the operating revenue is coming from. And it would be prudent to do that, in my opinion. Again, just my opinion. So with that, Paul?
Well, yeah, I think it's only logical that we have some plan for the future. And what's nice here is that we can kind of see what we plan on doing over the years as we progress. So I think this is a great idea to try and budget where we're going and how we're going to be doing that as we head into the future. So I think it's a great idea.
Just a couple points. One is, I think it should be obvious that we need to figure out the spending side before we really think about the funding side. You got to know how much you need to fund before you can really begin to think about where you're going to have to go get the money. So I would hope that we'll spend most of our time in the beginning here looking at what our costs are going to be and not where the money's going to come from. And then the other thing I would say is, let's not try and make it perfect. This is the first year for this. This is, we're just learning. So let's get a general idea of what we're trying to do. And in the coming year, we'll probably have some, whoops, we missed this, whoops, we missed that. But I think it's important that we do this quickly. We get something in place so that we can begin to talk about the funding and to have some sort of mechanism in place if we do run into another truck problem or something like that. So I would say keep it simple and really focus on the spending side up front.
Yeah, I appreciate and agree with the comments that have made thus far. The only thing I would add is I'd like to see detail on that plan as far as the items that are of interest, the capital expenditures, the assets that we want to acquire, et cetera, and prioritize that list so that we know what we're not just randomly purchasing, but we're purchasing with a predictive purpose.
Say, John?
Remind me, who has an idea of how long the rock sales are gonna go?
Well, when we did the new agreement, extension agreement with Centerlight, their estimate at that time was 5 to 7 years.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And that's non-aeronautic revenue. And I'd suggest, I think Bradley's right, we should talk about, what we need and then move on to where we get it. But in terms of that, I think if you're gonna do a shorter term, longer term, then we need to figure out how we replace it as we go, and that's part of your economic development umbrella. So a percentage of that and a recommendation of what the percentage would be after you see. Also, I think your suggestion is good regarding, when we're gonna need what. And I don't know if you can see into the future that clearly. As Bradley said, we're not gonna make this a plan that never changes. because it's a budget, and a capital budget is just like any other budget, it's a blueprint. So those are my suggestions, that we be cognizant of the fact that if you take a percentage of the rock sales, say, and other non-aeronautic, then we figure out a way to replace it out 5 years from now, and where we're going to get a replacement for that, so that you always have, I'm making this number up, 15% of the rock sales or 15% of economic that replaces it. That's my only suggestion. But yeah, look into your crystal ball and see when you'll need what, and then come back with a plan along these lines.
You want to weigh in on this one, Tim?
Well, since I'm just learning, I just want to point out that I fully support the direction of this plan. I think that that's responsible. I think it's forward-thinking, and it's going to be a moving target. But once you get a good, solid program and an agreed plan, it becomes much easier to maneuver and to fund your projects. So that's it.
So let me sum this up here before we take comments from the public. I couldn't help it. Sorry. I think it would be beneficial, John and Ken, if the two of you could come up with some sort of a draft plan for the airport authority to consider and discuss. Without some detail, we're kind of at a loss here. But let me circle back to something I had said a couple months ago in a meeting. What I had said was a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay? It's nice to have things identified as needs, wants, desires in a budget. As Bradley said, we better look at the revenue side first to see where the money is coming from. The more that tide rises at Carson City Airport, the easier the lift is to get these things on a capital budget for consideration. So, are we, everybody clear on the direction now?
Sorry, I'm confused. I thought Bradley said just the opposite.
No, I did actually.
Okay, I was with you. Repeat it.
But before we know how much we need to raise, we gotta know how much we need to spend.
Okay,
And
But-
when, and
But
when.
your point is well taken.
Yeah.
In that you can't spend money that you're not earning, right?
okay, then I thought that's what you had said.
But
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah, we have to take into consideration what our revenue stream is, what we're looking at, and like Bradley said, we need to look at what the wants, needs, desires are of a spend, and then prioritize. That's really important. But without the funds, that budget is meaningless. So I just want to really reiterate that fact that we need to be focused on increasing our customer base and airport utilization so that we have more funding coming into the airport. So, on that note, the task is yours to develop something for this airport authority to consider at a later date.
Thank you. I just want to make sure Ken got what you wanted out of this discussion.
Any,
I was hoping somebody was going to pull a rabbit out of a hat, but no, I want to circle back to the last page of the board memo, which is the airport capital improvement plan. And so this is the structure that I'm looking for, and so what I see this going forward is something similar to this. This is our FAA Airport Capital Improvement Program. So as you know, the grants that, well, maybe you're not totally aware, but the grants that we're going to be applying for in the next fiscal year that we just did the environmental for is the perimeter fence and access control gates. So that's going to be one of the grant items. But we're also did the environmental for the snow equipment removal building and the relocation of the AWAS. So what we think the FAA is going to commit to is the third piece is the runway rehab program. So for the grant next year, we'll have the local match for the runway project, which will be about just under 16,000. The design of the snow equipment removal building, which will be about I don't see that listed on here, design only. I think it's about 75,000. And then the local match of that will be 6%. So in the neighborhood of $4,200. And then the replacement of the perimeter fence, upgrade gates, all that sort of thing, is going to be a local match of about 43. So what I'm picturing in my mind is a similar structure to this with okay, we're going to get the snow equipment building in 2021. Well, I'd like to look at replacing the truck at the earliest by 2021 because it'll be able to be maintained and preserved in that facility. And then the parking lot, okay, what's our assessment on the replacement of that? Is that, another 7 or 8 years before we have to start looking to actually do a replacement versus just rejuvenation? What kind of funds are we going to need for that? And then just keep moving through those items that we identify and have something similar to this. So if that meets your thought process, then that's what Treasurer Rogers and I will focus on.
I mean, that's dead on to my thinking.
Okay.
And I mean, to reiterate what Clyde said, and you're saying more or less the same thing, is their priorities. And there are some things we got to do. Like, for example, a high priority is that we've got to have the FAA matching money. You don't tell the FAA, sorry, we don't have the money.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, we gotta get
that's
the
got to be
project,
a top priority for us, and then we work from there, but you're dead on what my thinking.
And then this way it just provides future structure for the board going forward. So if faces change on the board, this plan gets updated annually, and it would just kind of move with everything
That
else.
would have been my expectation from the beginning. So you
Okay.
come up with some sort of a matrix with dates, costs, et cetera, and then let us as a group review it and hash it out and determine, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense.
Perfect.
Okay?
Right.
All right. Fair enough. With that in mind, we're going to go on to item number 4 on the agenda, which is, I believe, our December Airport Authority meeting. And the desire to cancel that and consolidate it with our January meeting. So.
Item 3 squared.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's okay. Yeah, okay, that's all right. So, shouldn't have a whole lot of discussion here. Any comments from the public or staff? I didn't see any. Okay. And what's the pleasure of the board on this? Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, because
okay,
I'll be
enough's enough.
out of the way.
Okay, can
Part of
we,
the month.
can we have a motion and a second?
Actually, I think you can do this. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think you can do this.
You're right.
Yeah.
I can. So we're going to cancel our December meeting and consolidate any business from December into our January meeting, which according to this is on the 15th. That means January 1st is a Wednesday. Is that correct? Okay. Fair enough. We will also, on the matter of consolidation, airport engineers report and airport managers report. Ken, can you put those two together since our airport engineer is persona non grata?
Well, we like it that way because.
That's right.
It used to cost us $500
Costs less
when
money.
they sat here.
That's
so.
right.
The engineer's report really focuses on this pre-design meeting we had. That involved the team that you see below, the architect, electrical engineer, mechanical engineer, and the structural engineer. And we also, I have a meeting this Friday with the city planning department to discuss airport authority projects on airport property and kind of a streamlined process for the planning so that we don't have to approach them every single time for a certain project that we may have. And so that should help clean this process up. The other thing that we're still got a little bit of a hiccup with is the trash grate that we're looking at underneath the
Right.
floodplain on the north side or the west side of the airport. We had a design that we shared last month, and that one required a mechanical method to raise it during an event. Being that we're not a 24/7 facility, that makes it pretty difficult. So we ran that by the stormwater engineer, and he's just, you got to find something that's self-leveling. And so we're kind of looking, we may have to end up designing something ourselves. We got a couple of leads for potentials, but nobody's making the exact thing that we're kind of looking for.
So you're suggesting we get some sump pump parts and add it on more or less?
Well, or something that as the water rises, the grate rises.
Right, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
so
like
some
a
sort of
floater.
float,
I've seen-
yeah,
I've seen
like a
those.
dock.
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
baffles.
something,
Yeah.
something of that message.
Yeah,
The baffling, they're a little concerned that it could get blocked with debris. So it's more of something if it can raise up and the debris can pass underneath and prevent people from coming the other direction during, when there's no water in there. So that's the hangup on that.
That sounds complicated.
It
It's getting
is.
complicated, so.
It is. It's not, and we haven't found a place where this
Right.
is an issue.
And
where
complicated sounds like expensive, so.
costs
it
money.
could be. I'm thinking dock. You know, you got some sort of barrels underneath that can, that set into place and then raise, or, yeah, I don't know. And then the other piece we're looking at in conjunction with the gate replacement is an access control system. You know, we're very archaic in the system we have right now, and I think as far as our security process is concerned, a upgraded system would be beneficial to be able to program it from a central location, be able to review if an incident occurs, you know, who came through a gate at a certain time or that sort of thing. So if there's no other questions on the engineer's report, I'll move to the manager's report. We did have an improvement in the fuel flowage fee from month over month. As I said, we're kind of gathering this data so we can look at month previous year and relate them for the future. But it was a good month. Another financial piece is I met with a gentleman that I met at the Association of California Airports at Lake Tahoe in September. His name is Jim Altshell, and he's out of New York City, actually, but he has a project that in both Whiteman Airport and California and Southern California and at Hayward Airport in Northern California. And so when we were having our little chat, he was interested and he was out for the MBAA conference in Las Vegas and made a trip up to Carson City to come look at our airport. And he also met with Dennis Giangreco at that same time. So that was a beneficial conversation. He is interested, you know, how this is probably a long sales cycle, so we'll just kind of see how that plays out. Kurt Halkel did the airport inspection on behalf of the FAA earlier. He did have a couple items. I forwarded that to you individually. If you have any questions on that, we did identify the signage issue that we're putting in our runway project next year, so the FAA's already approved that. So that'll be part of our grant to replace those particular signs. I'm working with the lumber yard about trying to light there's 4 outdoor lighting poles that are on the north side of the fence of our property line. And he'd like them to have an obstruction light. That was looked at during the initial design of the facility, and the airspace folks from the FAA didn't require it, but he would like to see it. So we're having a conversation about doing it. It's more about a helicopter concern. Fixed-wing aircraft primarily operate to the south of the runway, so maybe somebody coming in that's not familiar, that might have an issue. As you noticed in my manager's report, I added for each of these topics that if it had something to do with our strategic plan to show the focus on some of these items, like the meeting at the Carson City Men's Group, the maintaining our airport infrastructure as part of the inspection. We did the light replacement of the high-pressure sodium on the south ramp with LED. They look good. Go ahead.
I do have a question about that item.
Okay.
If that's okay.
And they've been done and installed, and we're gonna get a rebate, and then they were about $1,200 from.
Yeah, I'm gonna want to take a look at that, but do you know just curiosity, what the energy savings is on that? Is it,
Yeah,
dollar-wise, is it significant?
Well, yeah, it's gonna be a couple $100 a month.
That's $2,400 a year.
Yeah,
And what was the cost of the install on this?
about $3,000.
Pays for itself in a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a good project.
Yeah, and those LED lights, as much as I didn't like them in the beginning, I'm learning to love them. No, they last, from a owner's perspective, they have easily a 10-year useful life. So once they're in, you don't have to mess with them.
And the light is superior to the high-pressure sodium. Yeah.
Yeah, it
just-
is.
it's a lot better.
It disperses better on the ground. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. And then at the board's direction, I did meet with the city risk manager, Cecilia Meyer. Turns out they use the same company that we have our aviation liability insurance with, USI. And I met with Brandon Lewis about a week and a half ago, and he's going through not only our documents, but he's looking at our coverages and kind of seeing where we may have some gap. So I anticipate having some sort of proposal or presentation at the first part of the year to share with the board. We have improved compliance with the gate, waiting in the gate area before leaving. And I was able to finally get the pavement markings down. We have a stop bar and the word stop, both on the land side and the air side of the gate. And we have new signage right smack dab in the middle of the gate. And that has improved quite a bit. But the one item I really want to highlight is the site visit that the FAA weather technical representative, Doc Richardson, and Lean Engineering conducted on November 14th. This is a gentleman I met in LA at the FAA conference and shared the discussion about our lead-in light approach lighting system. And so he was up at RNO for another activity and made the effort to come down to Carson City. And we spent about 2 hours together, not only talking and looking at the site, and we drove out to the field and went to two of the four proposed locations to look at the lead-in light array locations. He thinks this is a winner for us, but he made a couple recommendations. And there's one recommendation that he made was that we have somebody fly that approach and record it. And then Lean Engineer takes that recording and puts it up in a computer and then puts a flight path line on it, but also shows the terrain on that same video with the purpose of flight standards being able to look at that, the flight check people, and seeing not just a simulation, but seeing what that looks like in real life with the addition of the items, but with the terrain and the flight path indicator. So pretty excited about that. I met with CAP from Minden yesterday, and they're looking at doing that as a mission, but I thought there might be a volunteer or two on our board that would fly that. So,
Well, regarding that, is there a category approach speed that's required?
no, he didn't say that.
Okay.
I would stick to B2, just stick in the B2 category, and I think you're
Right,
He's
okay.
wondering about A category.
A category.
Why?
Well, that's what his aircraft is.
Yeah,
Okay.
would that suffice? Here's what I'm thinking. I have aviation GoPro, but I haven't learned how to use it yet. And there's, in my aircraft, as some of you will know, Moonies have a center bar right down the center of the visor. We could hook the GoPro up and fly the approach if I had somebody with me who could show me where to fly it.
Well, the other piece is.
And then what the altitudes are.
The other piece they wanted was, they actually want to capture the panel in that same video.
And that would be perfect
Right.
because I have a G1000 panel.
Yeah. So they want to be able to see the panel and then also see the flight path out the window. So we can talk about that offline.
Okay.
I'm seeing where CAP is excited about because it's like a real mission.
Well, if they're willing to
And
do it,
so-
let them do it.
Well, we'll see what happens. They got to get somebody to commit to it. We haven't, the people up line have not done that yet.
Yeah, we need to see where we're flying. That's part of it. And if I'm doing it, I'd either want you or Steve with me in the right seat.
Yeah, I'd bring another IFR pilot with you.
Yeah.
Just that way you get the orientated on the approach correctly and, because they want it from the final approach fix to the runway.
It's easy enough.
No,
Okay.
I think it's a good, I'm excited about it, because I see this as this project moving forward.
Okay.
The word I got from Paul Hanna was that he was back in DC not too long ago, and nobody's throwing up any objections to this. They're not going, oh, what a dumb idea, and why Carson City? He's not hearing any of that. So, they're gonna, the way I think this may unfold, and it's pure speculation on my part, is that nobody's ever gonna say, hey, this is approved. What they're gonna say is, you gotta take a closer look. You gotta look at the environmental. So we're gonna need to submit a grant request. And the grant request will probably start with the environmental, looking at the off-airport locations. And then simultaneously probably approve some of the design money to start designing the system. And then the FAA will at some point come in and pick it up. But they're gonna require the airport to show the initiative that we've shown already, but continue that forward until such point where they go like, yeah, we'll take this over.
Let me make a suggestion to move this along from one who has greased the skids with the FAA on many a project. It would be beneficial to the airport if our based pilots had a writing campaign, a letter campaign to our congressional representative.
Yeah, we're there, not there yet, but yes, I
Yeah.
concur with you.
Oh, it would be very beneficial in
both the-
pointing out this is the state capital. Exactly. And we need this. We need help from the FAA. Generally speaking, when some bureaucrat in the FAA receives a letter from a congressional representative, it's moved along very rapidly. If they receive a letter from our United States Senator, one of the two, it's moved along immediately.
I've had conversation with both Ms. Masto and Mr. Amadei, and their both comments were to me, "What do you want us to do?" And I said, "Not yet, but
Okay.
soon."
I'm just saying a letter
Right.
writing campaign from our tenants and users would go miles to get this done.
I see that coming after we do this. We get this video done. We send it off. We get some more feedback. I think it's in the next calendar year that'll happen. Probably the
Okay.
first part of that year.
Just a suggestion.
No, I appreciate it. No, I agree. And I think the board is going to play a role in that campaign. And I'm excited about where we're going with this. So that concludes my report, with the exception of, I'll touch on this at the end. If you want to go through the financials and we want to go through our strategic plan and where
Okay, well,
we're at.
let's go over
If anybody
to,
has any questions or comments for me, I'm willing to entertain those.
John, do you want to give us the treasurer's report?
There's no significant deviations from budget that need to be brought up at this meeting. Then the data is all in front of you. The one thing I did want to circle back on is, last meeting we talked about buying a tractor. And I would like an update from Ken on that.
Thank you. At the board's request, I did go out and seek funding. I also had a little help from the board chair, who sent an email to a contact at U.S. Bank. U.S. Bank contacted us, and they approved us for, they were going to approve us for a significant more amount than we asked for, which, they're going to support the price of the tractor. However, more than $50,000 requires a whole bunch of hoop jumping on the board's part and my part with the state tax department. So we're going to borrow $49,999 and pay a little higher down payment, about $3,000 more than was originally, the original loan would. And it's going to cost us 4 basis points, so about 4.5. So we're going to borrow the money at 3.99%. It's a 4-year term, and there'll be 4 fixed payments, annual payments of about $13,000. And the paperwork is here to be signed by the board chair tonight, and a copy of the signed minutes from the last meeting, and we'll submit it this week and be able to have funding here in December.
Good job, Ken. Let me point out to the airport authority something real quick on that note. One of the reasons I suggested that we have Ken procure financing for this is because when you look at capital projects and the ASIP, and you look at the grant match that's required, the grant match is about 6.5% of the total project cost. That's a huge leverage, huge amount of leverage. So it's always best when you can borrow at a very competitive rate like this to take that funding and use it, pay it back out of operating expenditures. The carry cost for the debt service is minimal in the big scheme of things when you have that kind of leverage with our FAA grant program. So.
And I'd like to publicly acknowledge the work of our chair in getting us that fabulous interest rate. That's a very good interest rate. Thank you.
That wasn't my doing, just. So, okay. Anything else, Ken?
No, nothing else for me.
Okay. In that case, we will move on to legal counsel's report. Steve?
Just a couple of real quick things. On the financing, the loan documents are really standard. I looked at them for Ken. They're typical of what you would expect from a bank. They're lending the money. They want to make sure they're adequately protected. So as the borrower, it feels like we're being overreached. You know, they're protecting themselves every way but Sunday. But that's very typical, and I didn't really see anything out of the ordinary in that. We also gave them the necessary legal opinion that they required, so they can go forward with the loan. And 2 other real quick things. One is with respect to having canceled or expecting that the chairman will cancel the December meeting. If something popped up that was of emergency nature, the board can always call a special meeting. I don't anticipate it. In my history with the airport authority, it's never happened in December. But at other times of the year, every once in a while, there'll be some kind of FAA offer of money or something else that involves us to act right away. And when that happens, we can always call a special meeting. And then the third thing is Mr. Giangreco turned back the other portions of his lease. I don't know if we got the record of survey yet.
We don't have the record of
Okay.
survey yet, so who knows
What's-
what'll be the final outcome.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see the final outcome, but I just wanted to mention that when we get to that point, it's important for us to record something. It can be a document created by us, just saying it's a notice that that portion of the lease has been returned to the airport, just so that the land records are clear that there's no lease on that airport. Because at some point, we're going to find somebody else who wants to lease that property and build it. It's already got the infrastructure installed, and we want to make sure that we don't have any stumbling blocks with that. That was one mistake that we had made. Ken wasn't here. We had made that back when, I think it was when Perry DiLoretto decided he didn't want to do the lease anymore. We thought we had covered everything, only to have the city point out to us, well, it looks like it's still leased to him because we hadn't recorded anything. So when we get to that point, we'll record it. That's all I got.
Okay. Steve, I did sign the documents over at Building and Planning I think I signed I know I signed them, the Mylar. I think that was,
That's for the lot line adjustment.
that's the lot line adjustment?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that goes to the board tomorrow. So Mr. Barrett will hear that tomorrow morning.
That should be a non-event.
Is that the lot line adjustment for the
The
fire?
riser building.
The riser building, yeah. We still need to follow up with Heritage.
I'm not sure whether, with Heritage, yeah.
Heritage had the same issue, and we never caught it.
No, we'll catch
And
that.
so we need to follow up with them and do a lot line adjustment for them too. I'm sure they're going to be real happy to hear that,
It's a $40 lot line adjustment.
yeah, $40 lot line adjustment. but
Well,
it
any
is what it is.
reports from my colleagues here on the Airport Authority? I have one minor one. I was hoping Ken was going to cover it, but it probably slipped his mind.
It's yours.
I'm taking it. You suggested I do so. NDOT has acquired 2 new aircraft. They've acquired a Beech King Air 350. It's coming right from the factory in Wichita. And they've paid the down payment and signed a contract to have built and acquire a brand-new Pilatus PC-24 jet. Yeah, well, their aircraft are kind of old. They have an old Turbo Commander and an old Citation jet. With that in mind, they don't have enough space. And they wanted to lease a facility on College Parkway. I tried to steer them into Dennis's hangars. That didn't work well for whatever reason. They ended up leasing the facility at 2500 College Parkway because it's on College Parkway, has parking, the hangar's big enough for all their aircraft, and they can have an office there, which they don't have. What they do with their facility going forward, I think we're going to hear about at some point in the future, but I would say in the mid-term future, not in the immediate future. Right now, they're focused on getting the aircraft here, and the King Air 350 could be here as early as the first week in December to as late as mid-January, somewhere in that time period. So we're going to have some activity there. I know they wanted to be close to Ken too, and they can walk over to Ken's office from there.
Looking forward to that.
I bet.
No, I think that's good news for the airport. They're going to do some renovations to the offices, so I think that's good. That'll make that facility attractive when they do decide what they're going to do long-term.
Yeah, if they ever leave.
And if they decide to do long-term, they can expand on their existing lot, but they can also look at other property on the airport. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, with 4 aircraft, they need space, and they don't have enough office space as it is, as I understand it, in their existing facility. And it will be interesting to see how it plays out, because their property, where they're located, if you all are not familiar, I know Ken and Steve are familiar, their property is not on airport property.
But they do have through the fence access.
Yes. So they have a free ride coming right through the fence, and they have their own facility. I don't know the history of how it ended up there, but that's okay. Problem is they've outgrown it, and this will give some new life, new activity to the south side of the airport and the main entrance to the airport.
Is it possible we could use this change as an opportunity to talk to them about fees, usage fees?
I think that discussion's already underway.
I don't think it's anything I want to publicly disclose at this time, but yeah, we're in conversation with them on a interlocal joint use agreement. So.
Okay, on that note, Ken, you wanted to
I just
draw our
want to
attention to
quickly
something?
talk about, as you know, when we did the strategic plan, we said that, each month that we would go through the matrix here, and if you have any questions, there's been some movement on a couple of areas from last month. One of them is the hangar emergency addressing. I've got the scope of work with Sign Pro completed, and I have the invoices for all the separate leaseholders. So those will be going out with a notice about proceeding with that project. And so we're looking to have that installed probably next month, weather dependent, obviously. But those are going to be done when I get the final schedule, I'll submit that to not just all the tenants, but I'll raise a level of awareness for the board. I did have an email this morning from Dave Rubin, the fire marshal, about it, and so I think it's going to be mentioned tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors meeting. A couple of changes were also I had an opportunity to present to the Carson City Men's Club, and I took the opportunity to survey that group about the name change of the airport from Carson City Airport to the Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport. and got about a 50-50 split. There were a couple of new names even suggested. I didn't want to go there. And then, so I've kind of used that opportunity to refine the survey a little bit, so I'm hoping to get something out in December, so we can start getting some feedback on that. And did a little bit of work along College Parkway as far as the cleanup is concerned. It looks a little bit better. Obviously, you pull the weeds down, it's still the same infrastructure. But I did meet with the landscape architect yesterday and got some preliminary stuff done with that. And then I even have a little bit of work done, though I didn't indicate it on this one, about the all-terrain runway. So I'll catch up to you on that. And then I am speaking in front of the Rotary Club on the 26th. So that concludes this, unless you have any questions.
I have one quick comment on here, because I do read through these things.
Nice.
Promoting aviation. And I see that there is, hosting a fly-in.
Yes, sir.
And I honestly believe that should be something that we should do next year, and it's easily attainable. I can give you a couple of suggestions. I'm also happy to volunteer to work on that with you.
Wait,
No, hold on.
I'll write that down.
Yeah, no, you can write it down. But let me give you two suggestions, and it's kind of a suggestion with a subset. I've had great success doing manufacturer fly-ins, in other words, the Bonanza Society, okay? We had last year, or maybe 2 years ago, and I don't want to misstate this, the Aerostar Pilots Group. Now, Charlie Hutter has more Aerostars in his hangar than anybody else in the world, and him and Carl are really involved in that group. And these Aerostar owners are big, big fans of their aircraft, very committed. It would be advantageous to reach out to either Charlie or Carl and see if you can get the Aerostar group to choose Carson City Airport for their annual fly-in. I mean, you'll get these Aerostars coming in from literally all over the country. And we had that in Tahoe, I think it was 2 years ago, 2 summers ago was when it was, may have been 3. But we must have had 60 Piper Aerostars sitting on the ramp there. We hosted the largest Mooney aircraft fly-in ever in the world there. It's not hard to get these guys to show up for a fly-in if you do a very decent offering. It doesn't have to be over the top. So I'm just saying, I think that's
about that.
okay.
I've had a couple conversations with both RV group and a Bonanza group. So,
Okay, then you're on the right track.
Yeah, no, we are. You volunteered to help, so I'm going to talk
Yeah,
to
happily.
you too.
No, I'm happy to assist. So,
I did have one piece of economic news that I forgot to bring up. Do you know the Albatross sitting on the west side of, on the north side of the airport, east of Bravo? Yeah. I collected $4,500 in tie-down fees.
oh my God,
Whoa.
that's awesome.
And I'm billing him for the next year, starting in January. So I thought that was pretty.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Justice.
Well,
I felt pretty good about it.
yes, sir.
Can I ask, just for my education, what approximately are we asking from the leaseholders or from the owners to pony up for the signage? What, I mean, is that like a?
It depends on the numbers, signs in the buildings, but the couple of the invoices I saw, it's about 1,300 to 1,500-ish. And that includes the sign, the mounting, and all the hangar doors are being numbered appropriately too. So it's not cheap.
Yeah.
But, the owner's committed to, being a part of the city is really wants it done, and, it's been slow, but I think we're in the right direction. I think our meeting we had with them was in March with the hangar leaseholders.
Well, seeing no members of the public, I don't see any public comment. If anyone would like something on the agenda in our January meeting, please let me know. Doesn't have to be.
Budget time.
Yeah, okay. Doesn't have to be right now. You can email me and we can, entertain it and see what the agenda looks like. I want to keep the agenda to a point where we have a clear, concise, and brief meeting as opposed to a lengthy one that draws on. So, but if there's anything that anyone wants, let me know. And on that, we'll call this meeting to adjournment.
Before that.